All right. Hello, everyone out there. There are. Welcome to week two of Sustainability and Society. I like to start each week with a video to kind of give you an overview of what's due that week and give you a sense of what we're sort of digging into that week. Um, I try to keep these as short as possible. Sometimes, as I said in class, I get really excited. There's so much to talk about here, but I do like to give you a really strong sense of what we're doing that week. So uh, we are, remember, just as a note, remember you can, if I'm talking too slowly, you can always speed up the video. I'm not personally offended in any way. I get it. So we are on the homepage here. Remember, at any time, wherever you are in the course, you can always hit the title up here and it'll take you back to this homepage. The announcement will appear here. Another important point, we have the calendar events on the right. This has all your due dates for all your assignments, but I also put a calendar event from time to time. For example, this week, as I've said before, I strongly suggest you get through all the readings prior to class on our in-person class on Wednesdays. And you can click on these and it'll take you there. The idea here is that you should really have gone through read everything and watched all the videos. It's only an hour or two on average of content each week. So you really should have the time, make the time to get that done. Remember, this is a hybrid course. The hybrid portion is the part you do outside of class, and that is primarily these readings and videos. Okay, so please take the time to do it. It's going to optimize your time here, and you're going to get the most out of the class if you do that. So the in addition to going over all of the content, you should start the weekly question set. Remember, you have a question set due pretty much every week in the class that have, where you go and, answer questions about the content. Remember that you have unlimited time on this. So you can start it, you can take a look at it and just see what the questions are, and then you don't have to submit everything. So I would suggest at least doing that, and that'll help frame some of your thinking in terms of what I really want you to get out of the content. And then you can always submit it after class as long as you submit it on time. Okay, so back to the homepage. Um, all right, so let's go into the content here. And just a couple of reminders. Remember that you can click on the course schedule. This is your week-to-week schedule, excuse me. Um, and remember that there is a little bit on the right-hand side here, so you can slide over to see the other columns. Okay. Um, and the learning materials folder is where you spend almost all your time this semester. A couple, again, reminders, a copy of the schedules in here. Here's a link to all the PowerPoints. It's a Google Drive folder. Here's a link to the YouTube playlist. Here's a link to the discussion board if you have a question, which I just noticed I made a spelling error, so I'm going to fix that. Um, and then here's the coffee shop. And then we'll play around with this document throughout the semester. Okay, so week one we've already done. Hopefully you can finish everything there. If you haven't completed your orientation quiz, look, I'll be a little flexible this first week, but moving forward I won't. So that is graded. So please make sure you complete that. It is you can take it as many times as you want. All right, so this is the general structure each week of content. I provided usually a little column, or excuse me, a cartoon or a video or some other um, thing to help you kind of think about it. And I try to be a little bit funny. Some of it is sort of geeky sustainability humor, but um, maybe you'll laugh like I do in most of these. And then I do like my quotes, so I usually start the week with a quote or two. Sometimes it's as relevant as possible to that week's content. Sometimes it's just words of wisdom. Then you have what's due this week. So remember this week, in addition to your weekly question set, you should be posting responses to other people's initial posts on the personal introduction discussion board. You're required to respond to at least two posts, but you should. I would love to see some conversation going on throughout the week. So try not to do this on the last day the day that it's due. The idea here is that you kind of get to know each other through the discussion board. Okay, and then I do provide an overview. So this week's content is about sustainability and systems thinking, very foundational, fundamental to the rest of the course. We'll be referring back to this content a lot, uh, almost every week, if not every week this semester, in particular with regards to the three E's, which we'll go over in a minute, and systems thinking. I do post questions to help you frame your thinking. And one way to think of this is you should be able to answer these questions after you're done with the content. Of course, there are many more questions that you will have answers to as well. And then any sort of like words of wisdom or final thoughts before you dive into the content. Okay, so you see here we have this week there's 5 subsections, which may sound like a lot, but again, it's only an hour or two of content. So the first one is actually a video that I did post the first week, but I want you to watch it again, and then I provide a summary video. This is that video about what is sustainability. It's a really good way to start thinking about what sustainability is, give you a really solid foundation for thinking about what it kind of what it looks like and what it is, and in some ways how to define it. Keep in mind there is no one way to define sustainability, and so you'll see any number of definitions out there, but there are certain ways to think about it. And as much as anything, I'm not super concerned that you have a memorized definition, but really what I'm trying to do is provide framework for how to think about sustainability and think, analyze things in the world and, does it fit into that framework or not? The second part is about sustainable development. And sustainable development, I don't want you to get confused because this term is really used interchangeably with sustainability. It really refers specifically to the societal development in general. So there is a whole world of research and an academic discipline called development studies, which is really about it's a study of how societies develop. Um, you may have heard of international development. Um, so sustainability, sustainable development, basically the same thing because really sustainability is the sort of general term where whereas we're this class is really all about applying that term to society. And so sustainable development is what we were doing in this class. So you'll hear me you'll use those terms interchangeably sometimes. So there's a couple of short readings here that um, give you a really good sense of what sustainable development is and sort of how to start thinking about it. And I want to just bring this up quickly because it is worth noting that this is a common framework that we will use throughout the semester. Now, I refer to it as the 3 E's: economy, environment, and then society. I use the term equity, um, but they're basically saying the same thing. Um, and so I want you to start thinking in terms of these 3 E's, not as separate. I mean, there are separate concepts, but really, when you look at sustainability, you want to look at how they overlap. And if you want to see if a society or really anything that you're looking at is sustainable or not, it should meet all 3 of these E's. Um, and just really briefly, because I want to make sure that I guess any little insight will help you start thinking about this. Economy doesn't just refer to money, although it does. Really, a good economy, a sustainable economy, is one that has good jobs and most people are employed and you get paid enough that you can afford healthcare and all that sort of thing, right? So it's not just money, not just dollars and cents. It's are the does that economy good for the people? Is that economy good for the people? Environment is pretty straightforward. Equity is basically about does everybody have access to what all of these things that make for a good life or provide a high quality of life. So it doesn't mean everybody has all the same of everything. It's not everyone has the same income, that everyone has the exact same health care and so on. It just means that people have access to these things. So they have access to good, high quality education that's affordable. Do they have access to good, high quality healthcare? Do they have access to good paying jobs and so forth, right? So these spheres really overlap. And we will continue to dive into those throughout the semester. And then there's the next article in this sort of series helps you think even more deeply about that. Then we'll talk about systems thinking, absolutely essential concept in sustainability. But as I mentioned before, systems thinking is important no matter what you're studying. Healthcare is a really, really good example. You cannot treat one part of the body independently because all of these systems overlap. I think that's pretty common sense, although healthcare doesn't always do it that way. Um, but whether it's engineering or economics, uh, architecture, whatever it is, you should be thinking in terms of systems. And so there's a short video here that actually focuses on healthcare. Um, and then there's a reading here that I think is really, really, really helpful, really insightful, gives you some insight on what systems thinking is, but really, I think critically, it gives some suggestions on how you can become a systems thinker and sort of questions you can ask yourself and so forth. It also really dives into sort of like why are we not accustomed to thinking in systems? Great article. You're not required to read all of it, but do suggest that you read all of it if you have some time. It's just really, really insightful. Um, and then we have these sustainability axioms. Again, another short article. Um, Axioms in this instance are things that are, I guess, sort of self-evidently true and in an independent way. It's these are things that can really help frame your thinking, such as uh, we cannot emit wastes any faster into the environment than they can be safely reabsorbed, right? So we cannot use resources any faster than they are being replenished. Fundamentally self-evident axioms. And then we'll talk about ecological footprint, which is a really helpful way to think about natural resource management. So the physical side of sustainability. Um, if a lot of the things that we'll discuss this semester, we will say things like, well, we should use more renewable energy sources. We should reduce our waste to the point that there's almost none. We should um, grow things in a more sustainable, organic, regenerative way, right? These are all really important, but it's a little bit fuzzy. And the really great thing about ecological footprint is it says, okay, if you have this lifestyle, you need this much land and water to sustainably support your lifestyle. And then you can add up any number of people. So look at all the people in Delaware or the United States, and then ultimately the world. And we can say, all right, how much land and water do we need for everybody to support all of their lifestyles indefinitely? And that's our ecological footprint. So you can look at your individual ecological footprint and any number of people's ecological footprint and see, are we being sustainable in terms of our resource use? And that also includes emitting waste and so forth. So it's really helpful because it provides a very specific idea of how much land and water you need, and then how much land and water you have. And then finally, we end on this short video about market versus non-market value, which is something that I think is really intuitive if you think about it. But normally, when you think of how much is something worth or what's the value of something, you normally think automatically, how much does it cost? What's the price? But I think if you think for really, you don't have to think deeply about it. There are a lot of things that are really valuable to people, but they don't have a price like a price tag to them. And so, again, this is a good way to sort of frame your thinking in terms of sustainability and what are we really sustaining? Okay, so that is the week two overview. That is the week two overview. Remember, you do have your question set. Remember, don't forget to continue to post to the discussion board. And of course, if you have any questions, shoot me an email or post to the have a question discussion board. And I look forward to seeing all of you on Wednesday. Hope you have a great rest of your holiday weekend.